Hey everyone, welcome back. We have Sierra Smith here from Sun Peak Official. And today, our weekly topic, we're going to be talking about how the US has become such a tipping culture and what our thoughts are on about it. So, welcome back, Sierra.
Hey, thanks for having me. And this is kind of an interesting topic, so I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm seeing so much people on social media posting their experiences at either restaurants or drive-throughs and just kind of their complaints or venting on having to tip so much nowadays. So, have you seen any of those?
Yes, I've seen a lot of really polarizing stances on the tipping conundrum, and I'm definitely experiencing it popping up in more unconventional, I guess, places as far as where to tip and how often that question is being prompted. So I'm kind of with everyone on like it's everywhere now.
Yeah, so just to tell our audience that, we don't just come up here and kind of wing it. We actually do some research and find some information on the topics. And there's a lot of interesting things I found out about where tipping started and kind of how we've got to this point. And there's kind of like this urban myth that tip stands for to ensure promptness. And, it kind of makes sense, but it's actually an urban myth. And where the word comes from is actually, if you look in the Oxford Dictionary, it was started over 400 years ago, and it's a slang that criminals used to use for like giving or sharing. So there's a lot of information, and I never thought about like where it came from, where the word came from, what the definition was, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, so if that's the kind of environment in which it started, was there any information on how it like because I feel like the first place it's been um like considered expected would be like in restaurants, right? Or in the food service sector.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, where it even goes back further, it was actually more from Europe and it came over to the US in like 1860, I believe. And I think there was what was it? There was a minimum wage law act in like 1938, but tipped employees were not included. And then that's kind of started the whole process of where tipping came into place. And then I think it was 1966, there was like a tip credit that they started, and this allowed them to pay tipped or tipped employees a minimum wage that was like $2.13, and I or yeah 2.13, and that's till today that's been put in effect. So you can actually, if you're a tipped employee, that's kind of like your minimum wage. So you can get paid below the minimum wage. And we're like um, the US is the only place that actually doesn't pay tipped employees a full minimum wage amount.
Okay, so now the way I understood that was that if at the end of their whatever their pay period was, if their amount of claimed tips did not equate to a traditional like minimum wage, whatever the standard is that the employer had to supplement so that they would get up to minimum wage. That's the way I had understood it anyway. So if they were getting paid the $2.14 and then their tips did not come out to, let's say the minimum wage was $8 an hour, then the employer would have to supplement that so that they were earning. Is that
That
not
was
correct?
that was my impression of it
Okay.
also. Yeah.
Yeah. Because so that's one thing that I think a lot of people in the who are anti-tipping at restaurants are like, it's not my job for to pay the employer as part of their wages, right? So that's kind of one of the sticking points is that the employer does have to, pay them a fair wage at the end of the day if they're not earning that in tips. Of course, claim tips versus unclaimed tips is kind of a different if you're going to leave cash or put it on your card and where they do have to claim it as part of their income, I know there's still some discrepancy there on what's being earned.
Yeah, I think part of where we're at in society too, where everything is so contactless, this is why so many places are charging tip or asking for tips in your purchase. It's just because they don't really even have to ask you anymore or provide a service. It's just prompted, and it's so, it's just contactless, and you just pay it with your Apple Pay or Google Pay or your your wallet. Don't even need cash anymore.
So where would you say is I guess the line as far as what kind of service would solicit a tip or should end up with a tip? Like, would it be after the service is performed, before, or is there certain industries where this makes sense and where it doesn't? What do you think?
Yeah, I prefer, if possible, paying after the service or whatever, product you're maybe purchasing. You get it, and you can, like you were saying before this, if you're ordering food, can you try it or some sort of product, and can you test it out and see if you like it before you actually have to put in a tip amount? But yeah, I find
Mm-hmm.
it very often that it's like when you're just making the purchase and you don't really know what you're getting and or what kind of service you're going to get, and you're automatically prompted to put a tip amount in.
Yeah, that makes it hard to do. I know my husband worked at a car wash and would oftentimes like where, it was a drive-through car wash, but um they pre-wash the car themselves. And so occasionally like if they would get someone going through the car wash that was like from the oil field and had just their caked on mud all over the pickup or something, then the person would typically tip them because it was an abnormal amount of work above average. And so that's kind of always, at least growing up, that's kind of where I thought you were supposed to tip is like if there's an above average service or above what's expected, then, there's a reason to shell out some more money. And that's kind of the how I had always equated it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of how I grew up too. And that's when, kind of makes it confusing today, is it's almost like you mentioned earlier, it's almost like you're paying the employee their kind of salary, and the employer is not having to be responsible anymore because they can keep their
Mhm.
prices lower. And you're like, oh, it's only $5 for, whatever, a coffee. And but then you're paying like maybe 15% tip after, so you're actually supplementing the employee, when the employer can just keep their prices lower to make you kind of think that you're getting a good deal.
Mhm. Yeah, true. And I think the like hair service, like when it comes to like getting haircuts or um like your nails done, I feel like the tips there have gotten even bigger compared to even like the food industry. Like it's more expected like when you go get a haircut to tip than even at a restaurant.
Well, I have no
Yeah.
problem tipping at a hair salon or getting a
But
haircut, so
to me, it's interesting because I hear a lot of people say like, don't go out and dine out to eat if you don't have the money to tip. Like that's kind of their stance. But I'm like, should I not go get a haircut if I don't have the money to tip? Like if that's not in my budget, like I'm also not going to, like there's some things I'm like that are a little more elective than others. And I'm like, okay, I guess I could cook my own food at home if I didn't want to go out and tip. But like, should I also take on like cutting my own hair and servicing my like all the services that I want for myself? Yeah, it is just kind of expected now, and it does feel like you're supplementing their income, which I mean I don't mind if it is a great service, but like you're saying, it's hard to tip for great service beforehand if that's when you're being charged. And I do think it's a little bit odd at like drive-throughs. I'm like, okay, this is supposed to be like a streamlined thing where like you're having to do less work because I'm not dining in. So this seems like the wrong place to tip because I thought this was supposed to be less.
yeah, that's actually, I think, where I'm seeing a lot of these social media people complaining or venting, is at drive-throughs. They're like, What do you mean I have to, or what kind of tip do I want to put in? I'm in a drive-through. Like, how much service are you providing me?"
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm with them on that's confusing. And I feel like too, there's some places I would probably tip more if I were tipping after. But since especially like a coffee shop, I'm like, well, if my coffee comes out great, then I would, love to tip a little more than, the standard 10 or 15% that pops up, when I swipe my card. So I guess I could carry cash and make that um possible. But I do when we do dine out, I actually do try to take cash instead and then
Yeah.
on run it on my card for just the bill and then leave cash as the tip instead because I figure that's preferred by most
Yeah.
servers. But that was one thing that I wanted to bring up was as someone working in the service industry, which I disclaimer, I have not. Now I do have like on my website when I was making merchandise for people, you could actually turn on the website a tipping feature at checkout. And I'm like, this is online. Like I there's almost no interaction between me and the customer. And it's just so strange for me to have to even consider putting a tip feature on. But that's I digress. Um, but for people working in the service industry, and I know as being a landlord, so I'll be curious to know your stance on this. Do you do anything to accommodate people who have tips as the main source of their income? So if they're an applicant to your property and they don't have a way to necessarily verify their tip income, but they do make enough technically to qualify with their income requirements, do you have anything, well, any workaround, or what do you do if that's the case?
For me, I haven't actually gone through that real process on my own because up until now, I've been using a property manager. So we haven't gone too in depth. I mean, most of the applicants I've had, their income source was verified. But now
Mhm.
that I'm self-managing a few properties, I'm sure I'm going to run into that situation. And I know a lot of people, they don't really um, like you're saying, they would have to call the employee directly and kind of verify what kind of income they're generating. And I guess you have to look at, I guess the big thing is kind of how the economy is going at the time and what type of service industry they're in. And right now, the service industry is still booming. I mean,
Mhm.
people, the economy is strong as far as service, especially in Hawaii. Like if you have properties here, you know that like the tourism is still strong. And so those people that are working off of tips in those type of industries are going to do fairly well. So it's a lot of it is what areas you're in and what market you're in. And that's where you have to kind of understand what market you're in.
Yeah, we had several applicants that around here, Jack Daniels is kind of a big employer, and there's tour guides and lots of tourism stuff around the Jack Daniels facility. And we had several applicants from Jack Daniels who uh, only had tip money to or kind of to qualify for the property. So that was something we ran into really early on was, okay, how are we going to verify that you have enough tips, and then it's like, well, we have the deposit, but we'll have to go put it in the bank before we can pay you. And so I had talked to one of my friends who always worked in the service industry through college, and I mean she's always made more money than I ever generated through a regular job that's not in the service industry. So, I mean, I know that the income is there for sure for people who are making it. I'm like, well, I don't want to disqualify someone who's truly able to rent. And so she said that her property managers, whenever she would get ready to rent, would just tell her for the next 2 weeks, every night after your shift, go deposit that amount of tips in the bank. That way we can see for 2 weeks that you've had consistent deposits. And that's what they use to verify her. So that's a tip out there if you're, in the service industry and you work on tips on how to kind of get ready to apply. Because I know it's hard to qualify for even rentals now. And I mean, now qualifying for a mortgage would be a different ball game. You would have to really claim your tips on that for a mortgage, I think, to look at it and say that it's going to be an income that could be used.
Yeah, the bank statement thing is super important. Like you can learn a lot about someone's, I guess, financial responsibilities, I guess, by looking at their
Mm-hmm.
bank statement and like you're saying, seeing deposits being made and what type of money is going out and where it's going out. Is it going out to credit card bills and car payments and whatnot? But that's a great tip. You did kind of mention as far as shoots, I lost my train of thought. What were you Oh, as far as kind of on this topic though of it maybe budgeting too, but for going out to eat, you can kind of plan how much you're going to spend monthly on eating out or your food bill, but then you don't really factor in tipping almost. I kind of feel like tipping is also like those hidden subscriptions that people have and they don't know that they're paying for them monthly and it just adds up. Like you think, $2 tip here, $2 tip there, and by the end of the month, you realize you spent a couple $100s on tipping people. But I think
Hmm.
that's a hard way to budget too, is you don't have this set amount in place.
Yeah, and it's going to fluctuate based on yeah where you're going and how frequently you're going somewhere. And like I said, I've always tried to just like keep my cash for those situations, and so it's a little less measured because it's not really in my bank account, and how I end up with the cash is always random. Like if I return an item and get cash back or something, and then I just don't put it back in the bank and use it kind of for the those extra things. Um, the only time I think I've ever budgeted for tipping is if I'm going on a vacation. And I know that if I'm at a resort or in like Las Vegas or something, I like already know that the tipping is going to be so frequent to either like have a drink brought to me or at the, because that I feel like it's so expected there to tip so that you get someone who's going to be constantly serving you. Like it's kind of like their incentive, like they're going to go bring drinks to whoever's tipping the most frequently. And so that's the only time I think I've ever even budgeted for tipping.
Yeah. So I'm totally kind of against tipping as far as having to feel obligated to tip everywhere you go. But I
Hmm.
think, like you're saying, restaurants where services are provided, and more so, like you're saying, after you get the benefit or whatever product you're purchasing, like at a restaurant, you can see the kind of service the waiter or waitress is providing you, and how the food is, and did you have to wait long? Did they refill your water, and all these type of things. And I think
Right.
that's fine with tipping. The one thing that I never really paid attention to. And after doing a lot of research, you know, I, I always just tipped off of the total amount. I never really paid attention to, I guess you're really only, you should only tip off of the before tax amount, I guess, in a sense. But I always just looked at the
Oh,
total and I tipped, I mean,
I
based
have
off of
to.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. I've never thought about tipping off the before tax.
Yeah. Because I guess, why would you tip on the tax portion of it,
Oh,
right?
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, honestly. Uh, so what you okay, so do you feel like if you're prompted with that tip question and they're standing right there watching you and you hit no tip, like do you feel like you're gonna get worse service? Because it's kind of an awkward moment. And I feel like that's where the frustration comes in is like people are kind of like, well, I might tip after, but let's see how this goes. And so I'm hitting no tip, but you're standing there watching me hit no tip. And so you already know like you're not making extra off of this transaction. Like what kind of service are you going to provide at that point?
Exactly. I feel the same way. I think, maybe a couple of years ago, you kind of feel awkward, by not putting something, but I'm sure you may feel this way too now. I mean, after putting ourselves out here on social media and doing all these types, I'm not worried really what people think anymore. So if you get zero tip, that's fine. I mean, like you said, after the service is provided, then okay, if
Hmm.
you went out of your way for my coffee or food, then yeah, we can look at this situation again. But in the beginning, before before I got anything, I'm not gonna, I don't feel obligated to tip anymore.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like if it's somewhere that I frequent, like I'm okay not tipping the first couple times, but then if I'm going back and it's been consistently good, then I would probably start tipping regularly. So I feel like everywhere I kind of want to get a feel for the service before and and I wouldn't want to, keep my business somewhere that wasn't providing great service anyways. So I'm kind of that way too, where initially I want to be like, okay, well, I don't want to tip initially, like just blindly going into this and I can't ask for it back if this goes wrong. So let's see how it goes, and then I'll start tipping.
Yeah, that's a great point because there's this pizza place that I go to all the time with my son in the neighborhood, and we always go for, to go to my grandma's house. But so usually I'll tip instead of having to tip every time, like maybe I'll just give them one big tip, one
Oh,
day,
okay, yeah.
and then that way I just kind of don't really worry about it for a while. And then, yeah, they always, when I call, they know my order or what I'm gonna do, purchase, and so it's easy. Yeah, I'll tip them once, one like you said, one big one maybe, and then not have to
Hmm.
worry about it for a while.
That's a good idea. A good
And
idea too.
the one other thing too I want to mention is I guess it's, is when you use gift cards, and a lot of people, use a gift card or coupon for your purchase. I guess I like to tip still off of what the value would have been before I used, a gift card or used a coupon. So, sometimes you use a gift card and what you're paying out of pocket is a lot less, and some people only tip based on that, like whatever they're paying. But for me, I feel kind of like obligated. If I'm going to tip them, I'm going to tip them off of what their full amount was supposed to be before all of this discount. Because that's, I guess that's, not their fault that I had a coupon or I used a gift card on this purchase.
Okay, interesting. So that makes me think of there's another way I've thought about it when I'm at a restaurant is, the waitress or waiter will have so many tables, right, in a section, and and then I'm wondering, okay, how much of their hour am I taking? Because if they're supposed to make $25 an hour or something like that, how much of the hour am I taking by sitting at this table? And if I take a full hour, if I'm splitting it with the other four tables that they have, that they're supposed to make $25 for that hour working those four tables, like how much of that hourly wage am I supposed to be providing, to them on there? I have thought about it in that regard. And if I'm camped out with my family and we've sat at a restaurant for 2.5 hours, like the tip's going to be bigger. And if we're in and out in 20 minutes and I'm like, they get to add another customer to their hour of service, then I'm like, maybe the tip doesn't have to be as long because they didn't have to serve me for as long. So that's another way that I've thought about it too.
One other thing I want to say is I actually, if you have young kids, I try to tip more because I know there's a mess they have to clean up. There's food everywhere, probably. There's food under the table. And so I try to leave a little bigger tip if, when my son was younger and I just know that the table was a mess. And one other thing I want to say, we just had a family dinner. My relatives were in town and we went to a restaurant, and sometimes you don't realize that they already have the tip included. Like if you have so much in your party, the
Oh
tip
yeah,
is
if your
already in there.
party's over so
Yeah,
many,
and
yeah,
they
I
don't
do.
tell you, and it's you just kind of bypass it and you put an extra tip on there. So my dad was doing it, and good thing I caught it. But we probably would have tipped about 50%, I guess. Because you would have did it. It already had maybe 25% already included, and then you put another, and
Hmm.
yeah, so that's something you got to pay attention to. Sometimes you're already included in the bill.
Yeah, that's true. So where's the weirdest place you've ever had to leave a tip?
The weirdest place. Huh. I don't, you know what? I haven't, I do so much online purchasing now because I'm so busy that I can't think of I mean, restaurants, of course, but other than that, I haven't really been to a place, maybe an ice cream parlor. I mean,
Okay,
that's
yeah.
not weird, but
Yeah.
that was probably one of the last places that I went that had a tip option. And I was like, you're just
I,
scooping my
I
ice
guess
cream.
I guess we'll do this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like the one place that has always felt a little bit odd to me is like the car hop. Like anytime you have someone like you're not dining in, like the places where you park and they're bringing it to the car and it's like, well, okay, yeah, this is almost another drive-through situation, but there's no tip option, like you've already paid, and you're just and even with like grocery pickup, I'm kind of that way. I'm like, are you supposed to tip them when they bring the groceries out to put in your car, or is this a thing where you don't tip? And so there's been situations like that where I'm like, okay, this I still haven't figured out what's standard on like car hops and people bringing the stuff to your car, because I'm like, is this an extra service? Or I mean, I did do online grocery pickup, so it seems included, but there's no place to tip on those orders.
Yeah. Now that you make, I'm gonna put tips for my Airbnb properties I'm
Oh
managing.
yeah, there you go.
I should include that.
Now I did work in the hotel industry. I was just a receptionist, but I know, I mean, the cleaning ladies would get tips all the time left for them at the hotels, and which I feel like is rightfully so.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
they definitely got, their wages paid by the employer, but if there were rooms that were, trashed. There a lot of times they would someone would leave a $25 or $50 tip if they had, really wrecked their room. And that was, rightfully so for the cleaning ladies.
Yeah. Well, I don't see it coming to an end. I see it just escalating. The tipping culture is just going to keep growing. I think everywhere is going to have it, especially like we talked about, everything being so contactless payments now. Everywhere is going to have this option. I even saw somewhere recently you can pay with your palm now. I forgot, was it at Whole Foods or
Oh,
somewhere?
I haven't seen
Yeah,
that.
you can just pay with your palm now. I guess you got to set it up, and you just pay with your, instead of your phone or anything, you just put your
Wow.
hand out there and they charge you. Um, but I don't know if you want to talk about it quickly, but do you think like receptionists at urgent cares or doctors should receive tips, or if you want to talk about your little kind of post you made on
Oh,
social media on the cops being called on you or
I
alleged.
yeah, I did end up, I being the great customer that I am, did end up having the cops threatened to be called on me. And I was at an urgent care, and I did say that the customer service was a problem there. But I had been called back by the nurse to come back and do another test to see if the medication that they had given me had worked. And so I went back, and the receptionist told me they weren't seeing any more patients that day. And I kind of got a little frustrated with that because I had been told not to make an appointment and just walk in. And so I kind of got into it, not bad with the receptionist, just trying to get her to understand that the nurse had called me and wanted me there, and that I now mind everyone, I drove 40 minutes to this place. So it wasn't like a quick little drive, and that I could have just went home and came back another day. So I drove the 40 minutes there to get it done, and the receptionist was like, they're not seeing anymore today. And I kind of pushed back on that and thought they could, in the next hour before you guys close, I think there's time. Like, can I chance it and stay, or can we work this out? And she told me that I was not understanding. And so she went back and asked, and then came back and told me that because it was such a problem that I could be seen today. And at that point I was like, well, you don't want to get service from a bunch of people who don't want to see you, especially for your health. Like, I'm like, I want people with a good attitude working on whatever health issues I have. So I said that because the customer service was a problem, I would go to another branch. And then she said, "Oh no, they can see you. They can see you." And I was like, "Oh no, thank you. I'm good." And I was like, "So where else can I go?" And she told me basically that I could go home. And so yeah, so then we kind of, I don't know, I just got into a little tiff with her, and I was like, "I want to just go somewhere else." And then she said, to leave, and that she was going to call the cops, and that she said that I was refusing to leave, and yelled at all the people in the back to come up there, who then for the rest of the hour that I was there all had like high anxiety levels because they thought it was like an actual threatening situation. So they were just apologizing, and they were like, we'll see you." And I'm like, it's fine. Like, I'll go. Like, I just thought I was supposed to be here. Anyways, so I did not leave a tip for her, nor
Well,
would
just
I.
imagine if you left a tip before because the nurse went out of her way to call you, tell you to come in.
Yeah.
What if you left a tip in the beginning and then you go there and you get this type of service? But can the audience, please comment below, and can you folks say if you could actually see Sierra being difficult or being, causing this type of drama at the doctor's? Because I can't picture it. I mean, I can't see her,
No, I'm not, and I'm not like that. And then there were even two other girls in the waiting room, and I go, sit by one of them after this whole situation is done. And she was like, I can't believe she spoke to you like that. Because even when all the doctors and the nurses got up there, I would, the receptionist is defending herself, and telling them that I won't leave. And I just kind of look at her confused, and I'm like, okay, if you want to defend the way you talk to me, like, I'm really just not going to argue with you, because I there's really no reason for that. And she was like, "Oh, well, I'm not saying I didn't have an attitude." I'm like, okay, well, thank you for owning that. Like, I just went and sat down, and the girl in the lobby was like, "I can tell you're not you're not a combative person. I'm like, no, like I'm shaking right now because she got so mad at me. Like I thought I put us all in danger and I was just confused about why they called me and told me to come in. Anyways, yeah. I'm if you guys want to weigh in on that.
Yeah, I don't see it, but maybe we'll get some comments and feedback, and we can kind of go over what the results were next week. But thanks for always coming on. Thanks for taking time out, and we'll do this again. But what my final thought is, don't feel obligated to tip. Just get used to not tipping. Like you said, maybe carry some cash. You can always tip after, but that would be my final advice. I don't know if you want to leave with something.
Yeah, I'm in agreement on that. Like carry some cash and, and pay when people earn it. I mean, for sure. Like if people are going out of the way to earn a tip from you, I think that's more than well deserved. So,
All right. Well, thanks for coming on. I will do this again, Sierra.
yeah.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.